So how often do people need to use that?
Well, it's funny you say that because this pin right here, this little guy right here, is really the only thing when you're on the ground that keeps it from firing. Once you do that, it basically closes the circuit and charges it, I guess you could say. As far as using it, the airplane, when the engine shuts off, it'll fire it on its own when it senses that, or the pilot can fire it if he needs to, if he loses any kind of critical system. But it doesn't generally, they don't use it very much. Let's just put it that way. It's only in emergency situations.
You're in trouble at that point.
Generally, yes, you are in trouble.
Yeah.
Be it you need electrical power or something to get home, but they don't use it very often because when it does, it's a major process to get it back and take care of everything. So we fired it on the ground a couple times. Never a good thing. So it vents, it comes out of the exhaust, and that's the hydrogen exhaust that comes out. So once you're exposed, you're exposed. Yeah, it's never fun. So, but it has been fired on the ground, so it does happen. But they don't generally like to use it very often. So never want to use it, I should say. Never want to use it.
So the gun is just on the other side?
The gun is just on the other side, yes, sir. We don't have a dual system for anything like that, so it's fired just off the left side. These are our AOAs right here. Like I said, this is what controls our leading edge flaps. Right now they'll move independently of each other, but generally in flight they'll always move together, which helps move our flaps symmetrically. Our leading edge flaps don't ever move asymmetrically, and if they do, the system will lock itself out. And that's because it doesn't really do anything if they're moving asymmetrically. It's not good for it. One of the things the 16 is known for, as everybody can see, is our big mouth on the front. And that's basically our air intake. And if you guys want to look down here, you can see how far down that goes to the front part of the motor there. So it's covered in a ram coating and it's white, and that's obviously to check for, for dirt and things like that, but also if you're having issues where you're sucking in carbon or a bird strike or something, it's going to show up real nice on the white.
How do you refueling the air?
Area refueling, the door is actually behind the pilot, and from the back of that aft transparency, it's probably about 4 feet back, and there's a door that opens up, and the boom will come over the top and connect right back into there. So
From the C-130?
KC-135.
Yeah. How did they know?
Well, the pilot he'll fly it in, so the boom will be down. He'll fly it in enough, and then they'll have a boom operator in the back of the 135 that's laying down, watching. And then when they get to that point, then the boom operator, he usually will fly that boom into the port, and then they'll just sit there, and then he'll just disconnect and come back out.
Like
and are the two planes communicating
yes.
speeds?
When they are connected, they have the ability to talk to each other as far as whether, most of the time he's going to be able to match the airspeed on the 135. That's why we refuel on the 135, because it flies fast enough and it has the boom. The 130s generally fly with the nets that come out of the back, and then you have to drive your
But if one is going like 1 mile an hour more than the other after a few minutes.
I don't know. We'd have to ask the Colonel if that affects him very much. Colonel, does that affect you very much? How much difference in the airspeed between the 135 and the 16 if you're air refueling can you really have?
I know.
Well, when you air refuel, you do it at 310 knots. Okay, so you just match their airspeed. If KC-135s don't usually slow down for us, so you can refuel off a KC-10, which is like a DC-10, KC-135, and we have boom capability only because of the door on the top. We can't refuel off the nets, but with 1 mile an hour difference, like you were asking a question, usually you don't get to that because you're constantly making corrections. Okay. You're probably making 2 or 3 corrections
so it's manual,
a second.
Not
Everything you do is, when we get up underneath the airplane and they have director lights, and they say go down, go forward, go up, go aft. Don't mess up whoever. Right? So you're looking at these lights after you're connected into the bottom of the tanker, and so it'll tell you kind of which direction to make changes. And you'll see changes as they're happening instantaneously. Within a half second or so. So as you're doing this, you're just constantly making corrections, flying the airplane. None of it's automatic, it's all manual, okay, when we do that. Also, part of this is the boom on the tanker extends. So not only does it drop, but it extends a certain amount of feet, and then it has an angle kind of a sweet spot, if you will. And so you can be in that sweet spot, and the boom will extend a couple feet this way or that way. But if there's any more than 1 knot, difference, you can tell right away. And if you hold it, the boom will, the boomer, the guy that's laying on his belly doing one of these, refueling you, he'll punch you off. He won't let you get too close to the airplane, or he'll tell you to break away, which means get the hell away from me, because I don't want you to hurt me and hit me, kind of thing. So yeah, you can't really have that much of an airspeed difference, but when you do, you correct it all, real quick, and then the lights will direct you if you get too much out of the sweet spot. Make sense?
How long is the refueling time in the air?
The refueling time in the air.
For the 900 gallon,
Uh,
couple minutes?
yeah, we use probably 5 minutes in airplane
Oh, okay.
because it's high pressure.
Okay.
So the boom will extend. It'll couple in. Before we get onto the boom, we'll open the air refueling door, which depressurizes the system. So the tanks are empty and they're depressurized. And then as they put the gas in, it pushes the extra air out. So like if I'm going to take a 4-ship, like our normal combat type thing, either 2-ship or 4-ship of airplanes, I'll plan on 20 minutes boom time.
Okay.
All right, depending upon how much gas you have when you get there, which I can check via my systems. So I'll know how long we're going to be on the boom. It's just then if you're, if it's rough weather or in the clouds or various other things, it might take a little bit longer to either intercept, rejoin, or stand the boom. Sometimes if the tankers have their internal engines up really high, then it makes it harder to stay on because the airplane's draggy, it'll fishtail. You have different, configurations, but usually you can handle that. It's not an issue.
But like a tanker C-135, how many F-16 they can refuel?
Usually they have a certain amount of gas, depends on your offload, but I mean I've seen like a 135 do 12 airplanes before,
Wow.
or more. It all depends
Okay.
on where you're at and how far you need to go. It's like I just did a tanker mission Thursday, and they only gave us 2,000 pounds per aircraft. Okay, well if I got there and didn't have a lot of gas, they could give me more if they had more to give. So it all depends on, I don't know the exact internal capability fuel-wise of a tanker, but then just divide that by the number of airplanes that you have.
So one more question. In the real war mission, when you're refueling, your the squad probably will protect you, right?
The what will protect us?
Because when you are in the
Yes.
fueling, this.
Well, you have to understand, a tanker, generally speaking, they call them high-value assets because there's a limited number of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so up until the last conflict or so, the tankers were always on the good side of the line, and the fighters would be
okay.
on the bad side of the line. And we would go back to the good side of the line, get gas, and go back on the bad side of the line.
Got it. Makes
Okay,
sense.
when you take over a country in the sense, and they don't have the capability to hurt the high-value assets, i.e., they don't have airplanes to launch and shoot it or anything, then they bring the tankers over the country. Okay, like last couple times I've been to Iraq, the tanker tracks are over the country. So you just drive to that, and the tankers, they take off from a different location for security purposes, and they fly, and they orbit, and they refuel people over Iraq or whatever country it might be.
Thank you.
You bet.
How long did it take you to become certified to be a mechanic?
It's about a year total. That's from basic to end of tech school, and I've been doing it for about 13 years. So they teach you the absolute minimum stuff, and then once you get on it, you learn everything new. So that's why I'm able to try to spout off the good information, So one real quick thing before we start firing up is the seat. As you can see, the canopy is not supposed to look like that. It's delaminating, so we're actually changing that, but it doesn't usually look like that. But our seat is what we call a 0-0 seat. It's an ACES-2 ejection seat. So 0-0 means 0 airspeed, 0 altitude. So if they were sitting out on the ramp strapped into that seat and they absolutely positively had to punch out, they could pull that handle, which is between their legs, not on the side and not above their heads. Between their legs, there's a D-ring. They could pull that, be ejected out of the aircraft, and be, with their parachute deployed, safely float to the ground, obviously avoiding any life-threatening injuries. You may have a broken leg, arm, whatnot, but it's a very, very high-tech seat and basically a system all of its own. It doesn't really need the aircraft at all to do anything. After initiating the ejection sequence, our canopies actually are rocketly ballistically ejected from the aircraft. The pilots do not break through them, and they do not just open up. These two silver discs right here are rockets, or rocket catapults on our canopies, and what that'll do is when he pulls that handle, it's a sequence, and the canopy actually be rocketly exploding. There's a little bolt in the back that expands and breaks, and the canopy will fly off, and they always say it's supposed to land on the left wing, but it was actually designed to go straight back and hit the tail if it had to. So there's a picture, I'm sure, out on the internet of a Luke airplane down in Arizona. They ejected the canopy, and it actually split the tail. So the canopy is just split in half, sitting right on the tail. So it does work as advertised, surprisingly.
And how do you test that?
You don't. The only test is when he uses it, you know?
You don't
So-
try dummies or something like that?
No, I mean, they've done tests, you know, and they've got the videos and everything. There's quite a few inspections and time changes that are done on all the explosives throughout there, but you can't actually physically test the system without doing some significant damage to it. You know, it is possible for us to fire off the canopy ballistically from the ground via two sides on a D-ring that you would pull out 6 feet and it would blow off the canopy if we had to. But after the ejection sequence is started with the handle, it's about 1.6 seconds. From the time that he pulls that handle to where he's floating down to earth, 1.6 seconds. And in that time, you got to think that the canopy's being blown off. He's being rocketly ejected, or he's being ejected with a rocket from the seat or from the aircraft, and then disconnected from the seat all in 1.6 seconds. So if the ejection sequence was to happen, you'd blink an eye, probably wouldn't see anything except the pilot floating to the ground.
And do you know people that have done that?
We actually have a colonel out here who's still flying who has done it twice. So, yeah.
And is there a maximum airspeed beyond which you should
Yes.
not pull?
Yes, there is, and I just went through egress class is 540 knots. There is a video out there of a pilot who did it in an F-15, same style seat. He did it at actually just below Mach 1, so you're talking 0.9, and he ejected and pulled the seat, and he basically, what happens is the seat just, it can't stabilize itself. You know, that is such a significant airspeed, and the seat couldn't contain him, so, you know, his legs were, you know, basically out of the hip joint. They were just dangling in his arms, and he survived because what happens is as soon as you eject, the kit will deploy, and there's a raft that automatically comes out and landed in the ocean. And the idea is that the raft will deploy, you go in the ocean, and you're supposed to land right in that raft. And then your belt buckles, your shoulder harnesses have pins on there that when they are touched with water, the pins retract and release the chute from his shoulder harness, so he doesn't have to worry about any of that. So basically, as soon as he hits the ground, he should be able to be out and running and gone. But yeah, so it is possible to eject. We found that out. It's not a good thing, but 540 knots and above a certain altitude, if you're above 15,000 feet, it's called a mode 3 ejection. So what will happen is you will actually, the seat, when it ejects, it takes air data input and has its own brain, its own computer, and it will take those inputs and decide when it needs to release the pilot from the seat. So if you're above that certain 15,000 feet, he's got 10 minutes of breathable oxygen. So he will stay connected to the seat with his mask and his helmet on, and he'll be able to breathe in the atmosphere until he's below a certain point. The seat at that point in time will recognize that and then release him. So very, very, very complex system, and it's an awesome system. So, you know, the aircraft, I was talking to Major Collins yesterday, another one of our pilots, and he says, you know, guys have taken it way, way up there. So if you need some breathable oxygen, you can have it for a little while and survive in the atmosphere until the seat decides that you can come down and be ejected safely and obviously make it down. Because you don't want to be floating for 5-10 minutes over a battlefield. You know, you want to be at that lowest point and float for the least amount of time. So survival kit's built into the pan of the seat. That thing is packed full. I mean, we had one out the other day, and it just looks like a square, about that tall, but there is just so much stuff in there, water, you know, food, everything. So, but the survival kit and the raft and everything is just released automatically, so the pilot really has to do nothing once he pulls that handle except hang on. And usually if you've talked to Colonel Clay, which I don't know if you guys have been to ops, and I don't know if the Colonel would introduce you, they say that, you know, most of the time pilots don't remember actually coming out. They remember pulling the handle and then floating to the ground. You know, it's that quick because you're probably out real quick. 'Cause, you know, the amount of G's that you come out. I think it's like 15 G's that you come out of that seat at. So you can imagine the stress it puts on your body and everything else. So that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me? No questions? Great.
Quick question.
Oh, yes,
Over
sir.
here says do not panic.
Yeah.
Why?
Those are kind of some of our radar and antenna features and stuff. You don't
okay.
want to paint it because it'll reduce the able to transmit and everything else. So a few things like right here this is basically our radar in here, and so another system you don't want to paint because it'll reduce the effectiveness of it.
Can this Block 30 be fitted with the conformal fuel tanks that the newer
No,
blocks have?
the Block 30s cannot. So it's actually I want to say 50s and above can be fitted with conformal fuel tanks. If anybody doesn't know what conformal fuel tanks are, they're basically another set of external fuel tanks that run from about right here to the back of the wing, and they're just a huge fuel tank, and they just sit right directly on top of it, and it looks like a big whale, I guess you could call it. But we cannot fly with conformal fuel tanks. So it's really Block 50s, I think. Block 50s and above fly with conformals. So that's all I have. I think these guys are going to get ready to run it, so if we want to head into the booth over there.
Thank you.
No problem. No problem.